I built a $3.2 billion company from scratch. Boss gave it to his kid. I took it all back. There's a specific kind of silence that falls over a boardroom when everyone in it realizes, at the same moment, that the wrong person has been sitting at the head of the table for the past 2 years. I know what that silence sounds like. I engineered it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to when I was nobody, and a man named Clifton Reese was everything. I joined Reese Meridian Group in 2009 with a duffel bag, a graduate degree in logistics management, and exactly $1,400 in my checking account. The firm was a regional freight and supply chain consultancy out of Columbus, Ohio, 22 employees, 3 mid-size clients, and the kind of office carpeting that tells you everything you need to know about a company's priorities. Clifton Reese had founded it in 1991 and run it with the comfortable confidence of a man who had never been seriously challenged inside his own walls. He was 61 when I walked in. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who shook your hand while looking slightly past your ear. Not mean. Not cruel. Just certain. Certain that he understood the room, the industry, the future, and certain, in particular, that young analysts with logistics degrees were best utilized running spreadsheets and keeping their observations to themselves. I kept my observations to myself. For a while. My name is Theo Vance. And the thing you need to understand about me is that I am not, by nature, a loud person. I don't walk into rooms making noise. I walk in and I start counting, exits, dynamics, who defers to whom, who's pretending to understand something they don't. I've been doing it since I was a kid growing up in Akron, where reading a room wasn't a skill, it was a survival mechanism. At Reese Meridian, I read everything. I saw that the firm's 3 anchor clients were being underserved by a decade-old operational model that Clifton hadn't updated because updating it would mean admitting it was outdated. I saw that the freight industry was about to be restructured by predictive logistics software that nobody in our office had seriously evaluated. I saw that Clifton's approach to client relationships was entirely relationship-based, which was warm and effective until the people he'd built those relationships with started retiring. I wrote a 47-page internal proposal. Distribution optimization, software integration, a new tiered service model that could scale the firm from regional to national in under 5 years. I printed it, bound it, and left it on Clifton's desk on a Thursday afternoon in March 2011. He called me into his office on Monday. "This is thorough," he said. He set it on the corner of his desk the way you set something you've already decided about. "Tell me, how long have you been in this industry?" 2 years, I said. He nodded slowly. "Right. 2 years." He picked up his coffee. "I'll take it under advisement." I knew what that meant. But I also knew what I'd written, and I knew I was right. So I waited. 6 months later, Clifton restructured the firm using roughly 60% of my proposal, rebranded it, presented it to the board as a strategic pivot, took the client meetings himself. My name appeared nowhere in the presentation. When a colleague named Priscilla Okafor, our sharpest account manager and the closest thing I had to a real ally in that building, asked me how I felt about it, I said, "Fine." It worked, didn't it? She gave me a look that said she didn't buy it for a second. "You wrote that whole thing." "I know," I said. "So does he. And that's enough for you?" I thought about it. "For now," I said. That was 2011. It would not be enough forever. But I was 31 years old, and I had decided something important. I was going to build something real inside this company. Not because Clifton deserved my best work. Because I deserved the outcome. Over the next 8 years, I did exactly that. I renegotiated our 3 anchor contracts, expanding scope and increasing revenue by 34% in the first year alone. I recruited a technology integration team, 4 people, 2 of them straight out of graduate programs, and built our predictive routing platform from a licensed framework into a proprietary system. I opened regional offices in Atlanta, Denver, and Phoenix. I structured the partnership with Norvex Shipping that tripled our freight volume in 14 months. By 2019, Reese Meridian Group had gone from a $40 million regional consultancy to a nationally recognized supply chain firm with $680 million in annual revenue and 340 employees across 6 offices. Clifton gave me the title of president in 2017. No equity. No board seat. Just the title, a base salary increase, and a corner office that was slightly smaller than his. I noted all of it. I smiled when it was appropriate. I said thank you. Priscilla, by then our VP of Client Relations, would sometimes stop by my office after particularly egregious meetings and just raise an eyebrow. Still enough, she'd ask. Getting there, I'd say. In 2019, a private equity group called Harmon Stead Partners approached Reese Meridian about a structured growth investment. I led every meeting on our side. I built the financial model, the integration roadmap, the 5-year projection deck. The deal closed at a $1.1 billion valuation. Clifton shook hands with their managing partner, Lena Sorel, in front of photographers for the press release. He was in every photo. I took them. I don't say this for sympathy. I say it because it's accurate, and because accuracy matters when you're building a case. The trigger, the thing that changed my internal calculation from patience to purpose, arrived in the form of Clifton's son, Rhett Reese. Rhett was 29. He had a business degree from a school that had accepted him with help from a very generous Reese family endowment. He had worked for 18 months at a marketing agency in Nashville, which appeared to have been his primary qualification. He wore slim-fit suits and used the word synergy without irony, which I found genuinely impressive in a grim sort of way. In January 2020, Clifton announced to the executive team that Rhett would be joining as Executive Vice President of Strategy. The role had not previously existed. It was created the same week Rhett's name was added to the org chart. Priscilla texted me from across the conference table during the announcement, "Are you seeing this?" I texted back, "I'm seeing it." I kept my face completely neutral. Clifton looked at me once during the announcement with the specific expression of a man checking whether the floor will hold. I gave him nothing to read. Rhett's first major act as EVP of Strategy was to propose unwinding the Norvex partnership, the deal I had spent 8 months negotiating, in favor of a newer carrier relationship that happened to be brokered by a college friend of his. The projected cost difference over 3 years was $22 million, net negative to us. I sat in the meeting where he presented it. I asked 2 questions. Quiet, technical, specific questions about carrier liability structure and volume guarantee clauses. Rhett didn't know the answers. He said he'd follow up. He never did. The proposal quietly died in committee. But Clifton never corrected his son in that meeting. He just watched, and said nothing, and let it happen. That was when I understood that the problem wasn't going to fix itself. I called Lena Sorel at Harmon Stead on a Tuesday evening in March 2020. We'd maintained a professional relationship since the investment closed. She was sharp, direct, and had made clear more than once that she tracked Reese Meridian's performance closely. "Lena," I said, "I want to have a conversation that isn't about anything specific yet. But I want you to know I'm having it." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been wondering when you'd call." "You've been watching," I said. "We're investors, Theo. We watch everything." A pause. "How bad is it?" "It's not bad yet. But the architecture is being changed by someone who doesn't understand what he's changing." Another pause. Longer. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing yet. I just needed you to know the conversation exists." "Okay," she said. "It exists." I hung up and sat in my car in the parking garage for a few minutes. Then I drove home, made dinner, and didn't say anything about it to anyone. Over the following 18 months, I did something deliberate and careful. I documented everything Rhett touched. Not maliciously. Accurately. Every proposal, every decision, every meeting where his intervention had created friction or cost. I cross-referenced it against our performance metrics, our client satisfaction scores, our retention numbers, which had, for the first time in a decade, begun to drift in the wrong direction. I also, quietly and thoroughly, began having conversations with 6 of our top 12 clients. Not lobbying. Not politicking. Just staying close, staying available, understanding their concerns. Several of them mentioned, without being prompted, that the feel of the firm had shifted. That they missed certain consistencies. That they hoped things weren't changing too fast. I told them things were fine. I meant, not yet. Priscilla was the only person inside the firm who knew what I was building. She called it the drawer, a callback to something I'd mentioned once about keeping records. How full is the drawer? She'd ask occasionally. Getting there, I'd say. By late 2021, the drawer was full. The confrontation, if you want to call it that, because it was really more of a presentation, happened on a Wednesday in November. I had requested a formal session with the full board, including Harmon Stead's 2 appointed seats. Clifton agreed, assuming it was a routine strategic update. He and Rhett arrived together, Rhett in a new suit, Clifton with the comfortable posture of a man who owned the room. I had 41 slides. 18 months of data. Client satisfaction trends, revenue trajectory, margin compression by division, staff attrition, which had accelerated significantly in the divisions Rhett had touched. I had it audited by an independent operations firm whose name the board recognized. I had 3 client letters, unsolicited, I was careful to note, expressing concern about strategic direction. And I had something else, a term sheet. Lena Sorrell's firm, Harmon Stead, together with 2 co-investors I had spent 6 months cultivating, was prepared to execute a secondary transaction that would bring total firm valuation to $3.2 billion, contingent on a leadership restructuring that protected operational continuity. I walked through all of it in 52 minutes. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just data and consequences, laid out in sequence, with the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time to be this specific. When I finished, the room was quiet. Clifton was looking at the table. Rhett was looking at his father. The board members were looking at each other. Finally, one of the independent directors, a woman named Audrey Bast who had been on the board since the Harmon Stead deal, said, "Theo, are you formally requesting a governance review?" "Yes," I said. "I am." Clifton looked up then. For the first time in 13 years, he looked at me the way you look at someone you've genuinely miscalculated. Not angry. Not defensive. Something quieter than that. He said, "You've been planning this." "I've been documenting this," I said. "There's a difference." The governance review took 60 days. The board retained an outside advisory firm. The findings aligned closely with my presentation. Rhett Reese resigned his position in January 2022, a mutual separation, the press release said, to pursue other opportunities. Clifton transitioned to Chairman Emeritus, an advisory role with no operational authority. I was named CEO of Reese Meridian Group on February 3, 2022. The Harmon Stead transaction closed 6 weeks later at a valuation of $3.2 billion. For the first time in 13 years, my name was on the press release. At the top. Priscilla was named COO. She deserved it about 4 years before she got it, and I told her so. "You could have done this sooner," she said, on the evening after the announcement, over drinks at the bar down the street from the Columbus office where we'd both spent the better part of our careers. "Maybe," I said. "But it wouldn't have held. You need the record to be so complete that there's nothing left to argue about." She considered that. "How long did you know?" I thought about the 47-page proposal I'd left on Clifton's desk in 2011. The first photo I wasn't in. The title without equity. The corner office that was slightly too small. Long enough, I said. If you've ever built something great and watched someone else take the credit, this comments section is yours. Drop your story below. And if you know someone who's been overlooked way too long, send this to them right now. They need to hear it. I still think about Clifton sometimes. Not with bitterness, that ship sailed a long time ago. More with something like understanding. He built a company, which is genuinely hard. He just couldn't see past the person he'd already decided I was. And Rhett wasn't malicious either. He was just a kid handed something he hadn't earned, and those two things are different problems with the same outcome. The real story was never about them. It was about what you choose to do with 13 years of being underestimated by people who should have known better. You could leave. Plenty of people do. Or you could stay, not out of loyalty, not out of stubbornness, but because you know something they don't. You know exactly what you've built, and you know that buildings tend to outlast the people who try to take credit for them. I built Reese Meridian into a $3.2 billion company. Every system, every client relationship, every growth curve, I can trace it back to a decision I made. They put someone else's name on it for a while. That never actually changed what it was. And eventually, the building told the truth.